The tunnel had transformed into a nightmarish battlefield. Rusty stood at attention as the skeletal army rose, accompanied by the grotesque humanoid spiders. Each enemy emanated an aura of malice, the green glow of necromantic energy mingling with the faint silver shimmer of Gleam's light. She chirped nervously, her antennae quivering as she perched on his shoulder. "It's fine, Gleam, they only have numbers as long as there aren't any D ranks among them, we will be fine." Rusty unsheathed his twilight iron blade and held his shield steady as the monsters attacked. Their focus seemed to be on Gleam rather than on him. It was clear that these creatures were drawn more to the living than to the inanimate magical object he was perceived to be. "I don't think they are underestimating you, Gleam." His friend pouted as the monsters seemed to regard her as the easier target of the two. Moments later, the battle erupted in an echo of clashing metal, shattering bones, and piercing screeches. Rusty surged forward, his sword cleaving through zombie heads and undead spiders alike. Although their enemies were numerous, they proved to be surprisingly weak, especially after Gleam unleashed one of her new spells, the Lesser Shield of Light. The result was unexpected and not something Gleam had planned. Once the shield materialized around Rusty, its intended target, the monsters recoiled as though stricken with fear. While the shield was designed purely as a defensive ability, it seemed to have an unintended secondary effect on the undead creatures. They were repelled by the light, behaving as though it functioned as a persistent debuff spell. "Good going, Gleam, keep that shield up and stay on my shoulder." Gleam chirped as the shield enveloped them in a radiant glow. The spiders with humanoid heads screeched as they lunged forward, undeterred by the shield's damaging effect. Their grotesque forms became a blur of motion, but as they neared, the radiant magic halted them in their tracks. This gave Rusty the perfect opportunity to strike, his blade plunging into their twisted bodies and defeating them with a single, well-placed blow. "You have gained plus 54 experience points. You have gained plus 48 experience points." He ignored the system messages awarding him for slaying the F and F+ rank creatures. In the past, monsters like the Ant Queen and the Centipede had been formidable foes at this level. But now, as an E rank, he faced no real challenges against these lesser creatures. They fell to his blade effortlessly, as if he were slicing through butter, and he was rapidly accumulating experience. "Congratulations, you have gained a level." "Perhaps." The swarm pressed against him relentlessly, but his attention was fixed on the system notification. His level had just hit 14, only one more to go before he could evolve again and enter the Soul Forge. The thought invigorated him, and with renewed determination, he faced the oncoming horde. They were nothing more than crawling experience boxes, each one bringing him closer to his goal. The tide of battle was shifting in Rusty's favor. Gleam's Lesser Shield of Light continued to repel the undead and humanoid spider creatures, giving Rusty the upper hand. Gleam's chirps were almost rhythmic as she released spells from time to time, sending the monsters back. Degree. A ray of light burst forth from her mouth, piercing through multiple zombies and undead spider hybrids in its path. Both of them gained large amounts of experience points as the creatures continued to swarm from a single general direction. If these monsters had any sense of tactics and surrounded them all at once, they might have been in real trouble. Instead, the creatures attacked in an almost single-file line, making their disposal surprisingly easy. Time passed and soon the tides were shifting, the relentless assault was slowing. Soon, there was an eerie silence as the last monster was defeated. The half-decomposed zombie dropped down to its knees after having its head lobbed off. Once it was down, Rusty heard a ding. "Congratulations, you have gained a level." Rusty felt a surge of energy course through his metallic frame as the system notification flashed in his mind. He had reached level 15, the cap for his current rank. This was the moment he had been anticipating, evolution. "Finally!" Rusty muttered, his voice laced with excitement. Gleam chirped triumphantly, her antennae flickering with faint silvery light as she perched on his shoulder. The tunnel was now littered with the remains of the undead and the humanoid-faced spiders, a testament to their battle prowess. "Looks like you're ready for the next step. I wonder how that place has changed, haven't been there in a while." A Burden remarked. He and Alexander had been with Rusty permanently for some time now. Previously, they had been confined to the Soul Forge, waiting for Rusty to summon them. During those times, they could only observe the changes in the forge before Rusty stepped inside. Now, with the ability to return freely, Rusty realized he could grow a bit stronger before venturing into his new lair. Degree. "Oh, don't worry, Gleam, I won't be gone for long, but also, it would probably not be wise to do it here. We better find a safe location, we don't know if there are any more of these undead monsters here." Rusty's eye socket glowed brighter as Alexander nodded in agreement. They were out in the open, and he would be temporarily incapacitated during his evolution. What they needed was a place where he could hide safely for a while. The two remained near the spider-infested area, having been fighting for quite some time. While those creatures usually stayed close to their nests, the noise might have attracted other predators. There was also no guarantee that more undead weren't lurking in these tunnels. Rusty hadn't been able to salvage much from the monsters they defeated. There were no cores left behind, and he wasn't sure if their parts had any value. For now, they pressed on, carefully scanning their surroundings. The abundance of bones and corpses they'd encountered earlier had disappeared as most had already come to life to attack them. After some time, the small openings in the walls, where spiders once crawled through, vanished altogether, signaling they were leaving the arachnid territory. There, a hidden passage. More Thieves' Guild nonsense, I presume? Mortals really do waste their energy on unnecessary things. A burden muttered as they came to a dead end. Upon closer inspection, they noticed a mechanism embedded in the wall. Rusty recognized it immediately. It could be activated using his Thieves' Guild emblem which was in his possession. Rusty approached the concealed entrance a burden had pointed out. The hidden nature of the passage was betrayed by faint markings etched into the stone, symbols only a member of the Thieves' Guild might recognize. He crouched and pressed his metallic hand against the wall's damp surface as he sought a mechanism. There it is. After searching carefully, Rusty found a well-concealed latch. Opening it revealed a coin slot, clearly designed for his guild-issued coin. After a moment of deliberation, he inserted the coin. The mechanism activated with a faint click, and moments later, the wall began to shift, revealing a hidden room. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple dead end. Gleam chirped with excitement, her antennae glowing faintly as she hopped off Rusty's shoulder and darted inside. The light she emitted illuminated a relatively secure space, untouched by the chaos they had just escaped. That mechanism must control the passage. Alexander observed, pointing to a lever embedded in the wall. The room was sparsely furnished, containing a table and a few chairs. A small ventilation shaft provided some airflow. It was clear this place had been constructed by the Thieves' Guild and could only be accessed by its members. At least I got my coin back. The coin he had placed earlier had reappeared on the other side, ready for him to retrieve. It was clear that the lever embedded in the wall would open the path forward, but now that he was inside this hidden chamber, it seemed to be exactly what he needed. How about I just evolve here? That isn't the worst idea you had, but is this place truly safe? A burden was a bit skeptical, but Gleam chirped with enthusiasm. You'll protect me while I'm evolving. He was happy that his friend would protect him while his body wouldn't be able to move. Before he could make a decision, he heard the door he walked through closing behind him. There was another switch near it on this side which was probably the opening mechanism, so he didn't mind it. Instead he just sat down on the chair as he made a decision. Let's do it, monsters shouldn't be able to get in here. Does anyone disagree? I think it should be fine, replied Alexander. If Gleam conceals her mana and doesn't cast any light spells, the undead shouldn't notice us, I suppose. A burden added his opinion, and it was time to evolve. Before moving on to the Soul Forge, he made sure to look at his status to see how his status screen was looking. Name: Rusty. Classification: Twilight Iron Armor EL15. Type: Magical/Inorganic. Hit points HP: 276/276. Magic points MP: 228/228. Special points SP: 50/50ths. Strength: 121E+. Agility: 92E. Dexterity: 91E. Constitution: 126E+. Intelligence: 96E. Wisdom: 98E. Willpower: 97E. Durability: D. 2 of his stats had reached the higher E+ rank, and the rest weren't far behind. As he reflected on his progress, memories of everything he had endured so far came flooding back. He couldn't help but wonder where this journey would ultimately lead him. He longed for strength and dreamed of exploring the vast, open world brimming with adventure. But he also understood the harsh reality of his path: power was essential. To continue, he would need to evolve, to push his limits constantly. Without that drive, his journey might come to an abrupt end before it had truly begun. All right, Gleam. I'll leave everything to you. Thank you. Rusty knew that while only a short amount of time would pass in the outside world, he would likely spend several months inside the Soul Forge. Each time he entered, he found he could remain there longer than before. He used this time to train, honing his blacksmithing skills and battling replicas of monsters he had previously defeated. He often wished the strong cult leader could appear in the training room so he could test himself against a truly powerful opponent. However, the Soul Forge required him to have defeated a creature before it could be recreated. His body eventually slumped into the chair, arms dangling as his consciousness faded. Moments later, he found himself standing on the bridge before the floating castle. Both of his guides were absent. "I don't think they can leave the castle." It seemed a burden and Alexander were bound to the structure while he remained outside. Wasting no time, Rusty made his way across the bridge and into the Soul Forge, eager to see his new body. His excitement was palpable, and he quickened his pace as he loosely looked around the area to see if he could spot any changes. This space sometimes shifted around and produced new things and chambers. Not much has changed, I think. "Ah, Rusty, there you are." A burden floated out to greet him as he entered through the castle's gates. Alexander followed shortly after, heading in the same direction as Rusty, toward the Soul Forge. Rusty gave his guide a nod but didn't stop to chat. He hurried forward, anticipation surging through him as he neared the forge, eager to see the choices for his two new bodies. The doors flew open as she charged inside, and just like last time, he had exactly 3 new bodies before him. 2 looking quite interesting, with one resembling the one he occupied now, just with a slightly different tint to it. Those 2 look strong. Oh, how interesting. I like the one on the left, why don't we go with that? A burden commented as he floated forward over to the armor on the left. It wasn't surprising that the late demon lord was drawn to that body, as it looked quite demonic. First of all, it had a dark, almost obsidian hue, with jagged, flame-like accents running along its edges. The chest piece bore a grotesque, grinning face molded into the metal, its eyes actually glowing ominously. Wicked, claw-like gauntlets completed the intimidating look, making it clear this was a form designed to instill fear and dominate. Alexander, however, was less impressed. "And I suppose you'll have Rusty rampaging around looking like one of your old generals, a burden?" he asked while floating towards the armor on the right side. "This one, Rusty, is far more befitting of your character." The armor Alexander gestured to was vastly different. Gleaming white with golden trim, it radiated a soft, warm light. The design was elegant, almost angelic, with smooth, flowing curves and a radiant emblem of a sunburst etched into the chest. The pauldrons flared out slightly and the gauntlets ended in a refined, functional design. A flowing cape of light fabric completed its form, giving it the appearance of a holy knight. "It's similar to those paladins." Rusty approached both armors, his eye sockets now devoid of any light as his 2 guides were floating around him. The 2 on the sides were half a head taller than the one in the middle, who looked like his current body. At one glance it was just something made from another type of metal, so he focused on the 2 on the sides. They looked rather magnificent, much more intricate than his current body, and instantly made him want to choose one of them. Could these 2 be higher than E and ranks? Rusty wasn't entirely sure, but after seeing Gleam's evolutionary options skip a small rank, it seemed possible that he could do the same. His 2 guides were already embroiled in an argument over the choices before him. Each insisted he select the armor that aligned with their perspective, a burden's sinister, dark energy or Alexander's radiant, light-filled ethos. It felt as though choosing one of these armors would be akin to choosing between them, a decision that seemed almost symbolic. He didn't need to make a choice now. Rusty knew he had plenty of time to decide. He turned his attention away from the ongoing debate, letting his mind wander. That was when he noticed it. A new door had appeared in the chamber. Above it, glowing letters spelled out. Summoning Hall. Classification: Lesser Darkness Armor D. Type: Magical/Inorganic/Darkness. Description: An empty vessel waiting to be filled by a demonic soul. This armor is capable of enhancing dark abilities, amplifying the wearer's potential for destruction. Classification: Lesser Light Armor D. Type: Magical/Inorganic/Light. Description: An empty vessel waiting to be filled by an angelic soul. This armor is capable of enhancing light abilities, amplifying the wearer's potential for recovery. Classification: Twilight Steel Armor E+. Type: Magical/Inorganic. Description: An empty vessel waiting to be filled by a soul bearing the power of both light and dark. This armor is capable of enhancing both light and dark abilities. I can actually identify these now. Rusty scratched his metallic head while murmuring to himself. Before him stood 3 armor types, 2 ranked D- and 1 E+. The 2 on the sides were far more eye-catching than the one in the middle, which appeared to be a modest upgrade from his current iron body. Though the middle armor was crafted from a new twilight steel alloy that would likely improve his defenses, it seemed underwhelming compared to the others. Twilight steel armor, that reminds me, didn't I unlock a new skill at level 15? Rusty's thoughts raced as he considered his recent evolution. Reaching the threshold had opened up new opportunities, but the potential threats in the area had kept him from checking his system screen until now. Finally, with time and safety on his side, he decided to take a closer look. Usually, the skills he gained during each evolution were tied to his elemental affinities, and this time seemed no different. Lesser Twilight Embrace. Active skill. The user calls upon twilight energies to increase their fighting power. At first glance, the skill didn't seem particularly powerful. Its description reminded him of the Fury skill, which boosted his physical stats. However, the mention of twilight energies and the vague phrasing hinted that it might do more than just enhance his physical abilities. He wouldn't know for sure until he tested it. Should I head to the training room to try it? Or perhaps... Rusty's thoughts drifted back to the decision at hand. The new skill was intriguing, but the armor options also needed careful consideration. Since acquiring his iron body, he had resolved to improve himself using his own crafting skills. With access to new metals and alloys, he might be able to forge something superior, perhaps even using the materials from the black or silvery white armor, rather than settling for the twilight steel in the middle piece. Then there was the mysterious new chamber that had appeared after his evolution. That, too, demanded investigation. One problem he noted with the armor choices was the materials. Each piece was distinct. The middle armor retained both elemental affinities, while the ones on the sides seemed to favor one element at the cost of rejecting the other. Choosing either of the side options could force him to specialize, potentially losing the ability to wield both elements. And that is why this glorious demonic shell is the best option. A burden declared as his shouts filled the Soul Forge main chamber. No human, or any of those puny other races, will be able to stand before the darkness. Ha! And what good will that darkness be against undead monsters like the ones we encountered? Light has always been better against such creatures. Alexander retorted, bringing up issues with monsters. Their bickering snapped Rusty out of his thoughts. It was clear both guides had strong opinions and were determined to sway him toward the elemental armors tied to their respective elements. Still, Rusty hesitated. He liked the flexibility of using both light and dark elements, a capability he might lose if he followed their advice. The middle armor suddenly seemed more appealing. It might lack the raw power or specialization of the other two, but it maintained his dual elemental affinities. I can always reach D rank later, and if I get better at crafting, couldn't I just make one of these specialized bodies myself? Rusty was a living armor monster, a unique being who could craft his own shells. In a way, he wasn't bound by the world's strange system or its rigid classifications. He could be the architect of his own evolution, shaping his destiny rather than being forced into one of the predefined paths laid before him. At first glance, it seemed like he had 3 choices here. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became that the middle option was the right one. While it might lack the dramatic flair of the others, it offered the flexibility he valued. He could forge his own parts, and perhaps, in the future, even create specialized variants that enhanced specific elements. A lot of this, of course, hinged on the materials at his disposal. If he could craft a body using an alloy that amplified dark energies, he could emulate the other armor's unique strengths without sacrificing his dual elemental affinity. Why didn't I think of it sooner? Why not use both if I can? Rusty decided to sneak away to the workshop area first, intending to explore it before venturing into the new chamber. Upon arrival, he quickly noticed that the space had changed to accommodate his recent evolution. The iron bars he had used to craft his previous body were now replaced with twilight steel. The forge had been upgraded as well, and all the smithing tools had been enhanced, gleaming with the same steel. It was a promising setup, but as Rusty examined the materials more closely, he realized there were no elemental metals available. At least for now, he wouldn't be able to recreate the 2 stunning, elementally attuned bodies he had seen earlier. Could it be because they're D rank, and I'm still just E rank? He pondered over the thought while surveying the workshop. Everything here seemed designed to let him reconstruct his shell using the improved twilight steel. The furnace, forge, and smelter looked more robust and ready for days of crafting. Satisfied for now, Rusty left the workshop and made his way to the new chamber. Hovering before it were his two guides, already waiting for him and arguing again. "So, you truly don't know what's in there?" the Black Wisp asked, hovering impatiently in front of the summoning chamber. "How many times do I have to tell you? This wasn't in my soul forge." The White Wisp shot back, drifting closer as if to inspect the chamber more thoroughly. Alexander had been the original owner, or at least the previous user of the soul forge. During the bonding process with Rusty and Aberdan, his gift had somehow been transferred and altered, reshaping into this new soul forge. Its current form, resembling a towering castle, was as much a mystery to him as it was to the others. This chamber before them was entirely new, and none of them knew what awaited inside. "Stop bickering, you two. Let's just go in and find out," Rusty said, cutting through their argument as he stepped forward. Without hesitation, he pushed the door aside, ready to uncover whatever secrets lay within. The summoning hall was vast, its design a stark contrast to the rest of the soul forge. Where the forge was practical, this chamber exuded an aura of ancient arcane power. High vaulted ceilings stretched into the dim glow of arcane light, with intricate carvings etched into every surface. These carvings depicted scenes of summoning rituals, mages surrounded by swirling glyphs, various creatures emerging from enchanted circles, and battles taking place in strange environments. At the center of the room lay an enormous summoning circle, etched into the black stone floor with glowing inlays of silver and gold. The patterns pulsed faintly, as though alive, synchronized with some unseen heartbeat. Around the circle stood towering statues of robed figures holding staves, their faces obscured by hoods. Each staff radiated a faint light, some cold and blue, others warm and golden, mirroring the twilight that ran through Rusty's essence. Suspended above the circle was a crystalline orb, slowly rotating in midair. It illuminated this whole vast closed chamber with a serene, shifting light that alternated between hues of deep purple and fiery yellow, reminiscent of the twilight sky. "Remarkable," Aberdan murmured, his usual arrogance giving way to genuine admiration. "This chamber holds power. I can feel the echoes of countless summoning rituals within these walls. This is incredible," Rusty muttered as he slowly approached the central summoning circle. His life had been short, and sights like this were entirely new to him. The intricate arcane symbols carved into the walls radiated an otherworldly glow, their meanings utterly foreign to him. Yet, even without understanding, he could feel the immense concentration of magical energy condensed in the chamber, particularly at its heart. Despite the awe-inspiring presence of the room, Rusty was still unsure of its purpose. Fortunately, he wasn't alone. His guides, as always, were there to assist, and Alexander's words suggested he had noticed something. There seems to be a console over there." "Console?" For a moment Rusty wasn't sure what he meant, but Alexander, instead of explaining, floated towards something that resembled a magical control panel. There was a large orb in the middle with many strange glyphs made of silver and gold. After approaching it, he noticed that the surrounding symbols started shimmering as if reacting to his presence. "What is this used for? How do I use it?" At first, he thought it resembled some of the mechanisms the Thieves' Guild used for opening secret passages, but this was far more intricate. It pulsed with mana, and there were no switches to pull, levers to toggle, or slots to insert anything, only a large orb at its center. Could you try placing your hand on the central orb there, Rusty?" Alexander's suggestion was clear, and Rusty saw no reason to refuse. Nevertheless, he hesitated for a moment, his metal hand catching the light as he reached toward the orb. Thanks to one of his skills, he could sense the dense surge of magical energy emanating from the device. Yet, he also understood that this soul forge posed no threat to him. His metallic fingers trembled slightly before he steeled himself, lowering his hand to make contact. The moment his fingertips touched the orb, the entire panel came alive. Glyphs etched into its surface began to pulse in a strange, rhythmic pattern. For a brief moment, he considered pulling his hand back. But Alexander, observing calmly, didn't seem alarmed. Then, suddenly, all the flickering symbols stopped. Before him, a large rectangular screen materialized, seemingly woven from pure magical energy and slightly transparent. "Oh, what is this? It resembles the world window, but what's that white arrow in the middle?" The screen was mostly blank, save for a few strange icons and accompanying words. One icon resembled the summoning circle at the center of the room, labeled Summoning. Another depicted an open book, with the words User Manual. User Manual. Ha, this looks like... Alexander trailed off, but it was clear he had some understanding of what the screen represented. A burden, on the other hand, hovered closer, his ethereal form circling the screen as if trying to unravel its secrets. How fascinating! What kind of archmage designed this object? It radiates high-tier arcane power. Rusty wasn't sure what to do, but after a moment's hesitation, he decided to remove his hand from the orb. As he did, something unexpected happened. The white arrow in the center of the screen shifted to one side. He froze, watching the screen intently, wondering if the arrow would move again, but it remained still. The mystery deepened. Rusty still had no clear idea what this place was or what purpose it served. His eyes lingered on the user manual icon. It seemed like the obvious place to start, yet when he reached out and tapped the screen experimentally, nothing happened and his iron finger just phased through it. Haha! Rusty, place your finger on the orb and just do as I say. Alexander chuckled after seeing it, and it seemed that he had noticed something. Oh, do you know what I should do? Probably. This looks like something from my old world. Old world? That doesn't matter, just place your finger back on the orb and then slowly slide it to the left side. Okay. He wasn't sure what was supposed to happen, but he followed the instructions. His metal finger was placed down on the orb and slid to one side while still touching it. The moment he did, he could see the white arrow sliding along with his finger movement. Ah, it started moving. The screen responded to Rusty's movements, the white arrow gliding across its surface with a surprising smoothness. He paused for a moment to see how it would react, and sure enough, the arrow halted, waiting patiently for further input. His curiosity grew, and he began rolling his finger lightly across the orb, watching as the arrow moved in sync with his motions. For a moment, he was captivated by the responsiveness, marveling at the subtle control he seemed to wield. Eventually, he caught himself. This was no time for idle experimentation. He still had no clear understanding of what this summoning chamber was all about. Had enough fun, Rusty? Sometimes I forget that you're not even a year old. What do you mean? I'm an adult. I'm already an E rank. Sure, now then, just place the arrow over that book icon. I know. Rusty replied, his tone carrying a hint of annoyance at how Alexander seemed to treat him like a child. Without waiting for further explanation, he guided the magical arrow onto the icon displayed on the screen. It seemed obvious to him, if he touched the icon with the arrow, something should happen. Yet, when he did, the screen remained unresponsive. What am I doing wrong? Why isn't this working? He muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. You probably need to tap the orb now. Tap it. Rusty repeated as he did not really understand the full logic behind this device. Still, he followed the advice and gave the orb a tap, but the screen remained unchanged. No. I mean, tap it twice in quick succession. Tap it twice, quickly. This magical device was utterly baffling. Rusty couldn't fathom why he needed to move his finger over the orb and poke it in such a specific way. Wouldn't it be far simpler if he could just touch the icon directly on the panel? Like that? He asked, glancing at Alexander. Almost. Do it a bit faster, and make sure the cursor stays on the icon. Rusty sighed but tried again. His first attempt failed as he tapped too slowly. On his second try, he tapped quickly but let his finger slide off the orb, causing the arrow to veer away from the icon at the last moment. Finally, on his third attempt, everything clicked. The arrow stayed steady, and the screen responded instantly. The white arrow transformed into a spinning hourglass, and after a brief pause, text began to appear on the display. He leaned in, reading carefully. It was a manual, a guide detailing how to use the summoning chamber and what benefits it could offer. The chamber was dim, lit only by the sickly red glow emanating from a series of runes etched into the stone floor. A group of robed figures knelt in a circle, chanting low and guttural verses in a forgotten tongue. At the center of the room, atop an altar stained with dried blood, rested the decapitated head of a cultist. It was pale, lifeless, and yet, under the guidance of the ritual, it seemed unnervingly animated. The mouth twitched, the eyes flickered with an unnatural crimson light. The man, seemingly a high priest, stood before the altar, draped in robes that shimmered with a dark, otherworldly energy. His face was hidden beneath a featureless metal mask, save for two slits through which his piercing, blood-red eyes burned. In his hands, he held a ritual dagger, its blade serrated and carved with intricate patterns that seemed to drink in the ambient light. "Reveal to us your sight, O Blood Lord, your loyal servants beg for your guidance." His voice was both commanding and reverent, echoing throughout the chamber as he plunged the dagger into his own wrist, allowing his blood to flow freely. The room fell silent as the crimson liquid dripped onto the altar, which seemed to stir with strange unholy energy. The blood began to shift and writhe, and, as if forming tiny red capillaries, it extended upward, reaching toward the head that hovered ominously above it. Suddenly, the head's eyes shot open, glowing with an intense, malevolent crimson light. The cultists surrounding it remained motionless, their stoic demeanor suggesting this was a sight they had witnessed many times before. Even as the head emitted strange, growling sounds, its jaw clattering unnervingly as it reset itself into place, they did not waver. "The Blood Lord graces us with his sight. Now speak, brother. Why has our temple been desecrated? Tell us who is responsible for this blasphemy." The leader of the group shouted, his voice reverberating through the dark, oppressive temple where they had gathered. The head jolted, its cold red gaze locking onto the masked man before it spoke in a strained, husky voice. "White, A-N-T, arm, or." Its words came slowly, disjointed, and nonsensical. The priest who had slit his wrist stepped forward, placing a bloodied hand on the head's pallid cheek. The crimson capillaries from the altar connected to his flesh, pulsating as if alive. A shiver ran through him as his essence melded with the head's lingering consciousness. Behind his mask, his eyes glowed brighter, consumed by a vivid vision. Strange creatures invaded his mind, one of them vaguely human yet undeniably otherworldly. The priest groaned, staggering slightly as the occult spell took hold. The head began to bulge grotesquely, its flesh swelling unnaturally before abruptly imploding, spraying blood and innards across the chamber. Without hesitation, the priest flicked his hand to the side, discarding the mangled remains onto a grisly pile of similar heads the cultists had already examined. This being, was it the one responsible? The other visions, they also reveal it. The high priest staggered for a moment, regaining his balance as the glow in his eyes faded to their usual blood-red hue. His expression was unreadable beneath the mask, but his tone indicated anger. "This creature, it is no ordinary foe," the leader murmured, his voice laced with unease. "Its aura is tainted, neither human nor entirely monstrous. Its power bears the marks of both light and dark." Twilight? But how? Such a blasphemous existence. The other kneeling cultists remained silent, their heads bowed. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, their stamina nearly depleted from the grueling ritual they had been performing. They dared not speak, nor even lift their gaze toward the leader. The grisly collection of heads before them was the result of their desperate efforts, retrieved mostly through grave digging and sacrilege. Each belonged to one of their fallen brethren, their lives and deaths examined for answers. The cult sought to unravel the mystery behind the recent catastrophe in Argasa, where one of their concealed lairs had been exposed, a calamity on a scale they had never experienced. Even more alarming was the fact that one of their high priests, a powerful servant of the Blood Lord, had been defeated. Their ancient enemies, the paladins of Galini, had delivered a devastating blow, leaving the cult reeling as they struggled to recover and understand how it had happened. "We must uncover the truth behind this. Find this blasphemous being and all who aided them. We will offer their blood and souls to our Lord. Only then will his wrath be appeased." He turned to a figure lurking in the shadows, a wiry man clad in a patchwork of leather and chain mail. A pair of cruel daggers hung at his hips, their hilts edged with symbols of the Blood Lord. "Bloodshade." The priest beckoned the man with a commanding voice. "Take your hunters and track this creature. I expect results swiftly. Do not fail me." "It will be done, High Priest. The blood will flow." The man referred to as Bloodshade bowed before the hooded man, and soon his form vanished from within this dark temple. Meanwhile, within the confines of the newly discovered summoning chamber in Rusty's soul forge, the living armor studied the shimmering screen before him. Oblivious to the events unfolding far away, he pondered the strange potential of the summoning system he had accessed. "So, if I understand this correctly, that summoning circle over there will send me somewhere to complete a quest, is that right?" Rusty asked while looking at the small text on the semi-transparent screen. If he was a human he would certainly be squinting. Fortunately, he wasn't alone. A Burden and Alexander were there to fill him in. Seemingly so. Alexander, still going through the instruction manual, replied with a distracted tone. Though he had more experience with this place than the others, and was once the old master of the Soul Forge, he couldn't recall anything like this ever existing. He had to assume it was a development that occurred after his soul had been fused with the monster and the demon. But, why would I do that? What if I die? And what will I even get in return? Rusty wondered as the idea of being summoned by someone seemed dangerous. It reminded him of the time he was a monster in the dungeon, forced to do the bidding of the dungeon heart. Well, for the time being, it seems like you'll be granted experience points, at least to some extent. Then there's also a mention of rare materials and schematics for the forge and also some other rewards once the chamber further develops. I don't like this, maybe I shouldn't use it. Rusty muttered. What's there to be worried about? There's nothing you can lose. To Rusty's and Alexander's surprise, a burden seemed uncharacteristically supportive of the idea. He was usually the one who urged Rusty to avoid risks, to be fearful of the unknown, and even to abandon others just to save his own life. Yet now, he appeared eager for Rusty to step into an uncertain situation that could potentially enslave him. Could you explain why? I suppose you two haven't finished reading yet? Fine, let me explain it to you. A burden scoffed at the two that had not gone through the whole instruction manual and started explaining why there was nothing to fear. First of all, don't worry, your immortal soul will not die. Even if the body you inhabit is destroyed, your essence will merely return to the soul forge. You've experienced this before, haven't you? A burden's voice was smooth and confident, echoing slightly in the vast chamber. Rusty found himself recalling his own origins, how their souls had merged, and the many times he had inhabited new shells. It seemed his essence merely attached itself to different bodies, unable to perish even when those bodies were damaged. He considered the logic of a burden's words. If his essence couldn't be destroyed, and if everything created in the soul forge seemed to exist to serve or support him, then perhaps there truly was little to fear. What a burden was saying began to make sense, but he still had some concerns. What if I'm trapped somewhere, or worse, what if they find a way to harm my soul? Unlikely. A burden reassured him with a flicker of amusement. The summoning merely sends a fragment of your essence to animate a temporary vessel, one crafted from the summoning circle itself. Think of it as wearing a different suit of armor for a short time. Even if that suit is destroyed, your core essence will snap back here, completely intact. Wait, so? I can't be destroyed doing this. Well, you can, but you will just return back here as if nothing happened. A burden replied smugly. The only limit is time. The summoning chamber allows access for a finite duration, an hourglass's worth, so to speak. Whatever you accomplish must be done within that window. The rewards, too, are tied to your performance during that time. Fail to make the most of it, and you'll walk away with only the scraps of effort. Rusty was lost in thought as he began rereading the instructions. It became clear that a few laws governed this new device. One of them stated that it had a limited number of uses. Once summoned and tasked with completing a mission, he would receive rewards, but a cooldown period would be initiated afterward, during which he couldn't access the device or return to that place. Although time flowed differently outside the Soul Forge, there was still a strict time limit within. If each mission required a cooldown, then his opportunities to complete more missions would be constrained. Another concern gnawed at him: where exactly would he be sent, and would his actions in that realm affect the real world outside? His physical body was currently in suspended animation, hidden in a chamber with gleam. Would being summoned extend the time required for his evolution? What do you think, Alexander? Is it safe? He wasn't much of a fast reader, so he relied on his two guides. Alexander was the one who had enabled him to access this instruction manual and seemed to be more informed than a burden, who had quickly gone through it. The idea of serving another master didn't sit well with him, but if there were free rewards that allowed him to gain more power, then this chamber might not be such a bad idea after all. I don't like to agree with him, but this should be safe. Haha, that the hero would agree with me on something. A burden cackled as he heard Alexander approve of his assessment. This was all that Rusty needed to give this strange summoning chamber a try. He wasn't sure where or what he would be doing, but if he could earn more experience points and better materials for the forge with it, then it was worth it. So, how does this work? First, you have to click the summoning icon on the display. Alright. Rusty hesitated only briefly before following the instructions. He placed his finger back on the orb and carefully guided the arrow toward the summoning icon on the glowing display. This time, his movements were more confident, the earlier trial and error having taught him the quirks of the strange interface. Once the arrow hovered over the summoning icon, he tapped the orb twice in quick succession. The screen flickered momentarily before displaying a new set of options. Rusty leaned closer, his shiny body reflecting the screen light. Quest. Necromancer's Helper. Difficulty. Hard. Description. A necromancer summons you to defend his lair from an onslaught. Help him defend his lair. Oh. He glanced at the first mission and it seemed interesting. He would be summoned to defend someone's lair, something that he was trying to create in the next city he would go to. He didn't know how strong his enemies would be, but the quest window was informing him that it wouldn't be an easy quest to fulfill. Necromancer? Let's pass on this, for all we know he deserves it. Huh? What are you even saying? Before he could say anything, his two guides were already back to arguing. He quickly glanced back at the two other options on the screen, wondering which of them he should pick. From what the instruction manual said, if he chose one the other two would be lost. The remaining options on the screen glowed faintly, their titles enticing and mysterious. Rusty's gaze shifted to the next quest description, curious about what other tasks the summoning chamber might have in store. Quest. Artifact Recovery. Difficulty. Medium. Description. A group of adventurers seeks your assistance in retrieving a stolen artifact from a band of ruthless mercenaries. Chase them down before they get away and retrieve it. Chasing down thieves? Interesting, and the last one is Quest. Monster Combat. Difficulty. Easy. Description. Defeat the other summoned monster in a one-on-one battle and defend your summoner's honor. Rusty glanced over the three options, pondering which one to choose. It was clear that selecting a higher difficulty would yield greater rewards, but the risk of dying during the mission meant he'd walk away with nothing. Let's go with the first one, Rusty. I'm sure that Necromancer has plenty of minions you can hide behind. If you run down the clock, you'll still get some rewards. A Burden suggested, his black orb-like form floating next to the screen. Of course, Alexander had his own opinion and he seemed to favor the middle option. The middle one doesn't sound too difficult, and those adventurers will probably assist you during the mission. Everyone knows the key to fighting undead is taking down the Necromancer. If he falls, you'll be forced to defend him, and probably fail. Those bastards love blowing up their minions to save their hide. Alexander raised a valid point. If Rusty ended up as just another minion, he'd likely be used as a shield. His chances of survival seemed slim. However, the middle option didn't appeal to him much either. He was a living armor monster, not a hound. What if those mercenaries were too fast or mounted on horses? How could he possibly chase them down? Then there was the third option, a straightforward duel between monsters, with seemingly no additional complications. Perhaps I should go with that one first. While he wasn't one to shy away from a challenge, there was no reason to rush into danger. Testing the summoning chamber with the simplest mission first seemed like the most prudent choice. Before his two guides could voice any objections, he clicked on the third option.